The Cyclops, Part 2. It was dim inside, but pleasantly cool and airy. And as soon as our eyes had adjusted to the light, we saw pens full of lambs and kids. Alongside these stood buckets of whey and rows and buckets of cheese stacked high right up to the ceiling. Whoever lives here must be a giant, I joked as I looked around. Anyone else would need a ladder to get to the top of those stacks, and there's no ladder here. My men were all for taking as much cheese, lambs, and kids as they could, and making our escape before the owner returned. I was outraged. We're not mean, sneaking burglars, but men of honor, I exclaimed. Besides, unless we wait for the owner, how do we find out where we are? This shamed them into silence. We lit a fire and helped ourselves to some of the excellent cheese while we waited. We did not have to wait long. As soon as we saw the owner, I realized that it had been a terrible mistake to stay. He was not merely a giant, he was a colossus, with an ugly savage face and a single huge eye planted right in the middle of his forehead. He penned up his rams and billy goats in the courtyard and drove his ewes, milking goats outside. When he had sealed up the entrance to the cave with an enormous boulder that 20 strong men could not have budged, he began milking his flocks and curdling some of the milk to make cheese. Once he had finished, he rekindled the fire, ready to eat his supper and settle down for the night. All this time, we had cowered in the shadows, hoping by some miracle to escape his notice. But as soon as the firelight spread around the cave, he saw us, his uninvited guest. "Who the hell are you?" he growled. "And what are you doing here?" We were terrified, and I had to make a huge effort to sound calm as I replied. "We are Greeks lost at sea on our return from Troy. We came to you in the hope that you'll help us find our way. And in the name of the mighty Zeus, patron of all guests and suppliants, we ask you to show us your hospitality." The giant bared his foul teeth and laughed in my face. "You can forget your mighty Zeus, little Greek. I'm a Cyclops, and we Cyclops couldn't care less about the gods. As for my hospitality, you'll have a chance to sample that in a moment. But first, tell me more. Where have you moored your ship, and how many other little Greeks did you leave behind to guard it?" "Our ship was broken up on the rocks," I replied, thinking quickly. "We are the only survivors." The Cyclops grunted and spit in the dust at my feet. Then, without warning, he seized two of my companions and smashed their heads against the rock walls of the cave until their blood ran down and soaked into the floor. Before our sickened eyes, he devoured them whole and, smacking his bulbous lips, washed down his last mouthfuls with 2 buckets of milk. We huddled in a corner, too shocked and disgusted to speak, as the Cyclops lay down among his animals and slept. I drew my sword with a trembling hand, ready to kill him then and there, but to do so would have been suicide, for we could never have shifted the enormous boulder that sealed the door. We passed a wretched night, pressed together for comfort, unable to sleep. The next morning, the Cyclops rekindled the fire, milked his flocks, and ate 2 more of my companions for breakfast. Then, having shut us in, he drove his flocks off to the mountainside and left us in despair. We had to do something quickly, or in another 2 days, this gruesome creature would have consumed us all. But what on earth could we do? I thought, and I thought, until at last I came up with a plan. Alongside the pens lay a long trunk of an olive tree, the size of a mast from one of our ships. I cut off a strip, sharpened it to a point, and because it was still green, placed it in the fire to harden. When I was satisfied with my work, I hid the weapon under the layers of dung that lay around the cave. Too anxious to talk or eat, we waited for the monster to return. He came at nightfall, driving his flocks before him into the cave. Perhaps he sensed that he was at risk, because perhaps some god had warned him. I don't know. But this time he didn't leave a single ram or billy goat out in the fenced courtyard. When all the animals were inside, he rolled the massive boulder back into place and began milking his flocks as before. He put the lambs and kids with their mothers, set some of the milk aside to curdle, and then grabbed 2 more of my men and made his bloody meal of them. He was still belching and spitting out their bones when I decided to put my plan into action. There was no time to lose. I had with me a skin of the dark, fragrant wine that Maron, Prince of Apollo at Ismarus, had given me because I had protected him and his family from the brutality of my men. This was a special wine, a drink for the gods, with a heady fragrance that made it irresistible. Marone would mix it with 20 parts of spring water when he offered it to his friends, and one glass was still enough to make them drunk. I filled the bowl to the brim with the undiluted wine and carried it over to Cyclops. Pitiless Cyclops, I began, terrified that he would devour me then and there. Surely you've had your fill of human meat. You've eaten 6 of my men, and there are only 7 of us left. I had intended to offer you this wine in return for your hospitality. Now I can only hope that its divine fragrance will soften your heart and turn your thoughts to mercy. The grinning monster grabbed the bowl and swallowed the wine in a single gulp. He belched noisily and demanded another, which he drank like the first. His grin slackened and he belched again and then smacked his fleshy lips and rubbed his vast stomach. Well, 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 little Greek, you've managed to surprise me. We Cyclops make good wine, but this is in a different class. Give me some more and tell me your name. In return for your excellent wine, I'm going to do a special favor for you. The Cyclops let out an evil chuckle. He slapped his sides and roared with laughter so that the cave echoed and the flock shifted uneasily in their pens. The wine was having its effect. The Cyclops drank 3 more bowls in quick succession. His grin became a drunken leer, and when he spoke again, he slurred his word. Come on, then, little Greek, I asked you your name. Out with it, no need to be shy. To humor the monster, I tried to sound as meek as possible, which under the circumstances was only too easy. Mighty Cyclops, my name is Nomen. Now I beg you to grant me the favor you promised me. Well, Nomen, this is what I'm going to do. I'll put you at the bottom of the menu and eat all your friends first. That way, you'll be able to enjoy my hospitality a little longer. And with a final belch and a braying laugh, the monster slumped into a drunken stupor and began snoring. Immediately, I pulled the wooden stake from its hiding place and thrust it in the embers of the fire. Within minutes, it was glowing red hot. Trembling with fear, we carried it over to where the sleeping giant lay flat on his back and raised it above his head. I gave the word, now, and my men drove the stake down into the monster's single eye, while I hung from the top to add more force. There was a loud hiss as the burning wood pierced the watery membrane. The eye steamed for a moment, and then the blood gushed out. The Cyclops awoke with a hideous scream, and we immediately scattered out of his reach. He wrenched the stake from his eye and hurled it against the wall. In the dim light of the cave, I could see at once that his eyeball was burned right out. The Cyclops would never see again. The cave echoed with his roars of pain and anger, and his flocks cowered in their pens as he crashed blindly about, searching for us. Terrified like the animals, we huddled together among them until he gave up the search. Then he called out to his fellow Cyclops across the island. They came rushing to his cave. Polyphemus, they shouted when they had gathered around the entrance. What on earth is the matter? Has someone attacked you or stolen your flocks that you wake the whole island at this time of night? Nomen has attacked me, the Cyclops shouted back. Nomen is hiding in my cave. If no one's there, then you must be having nightmares, replied the other Cyclops impatiently. Go back to bed and let us get some sleep.